Alicia Curtis and Janie Dolachek, some dear friends of mine and Silva Method instructors in the Oklahoma area, came up with a Silva Method formula that changed the world. The formula has 4 different steps. The first step is to manage stress effectively. The second is to think of what you want and only what you want, not to waste time on anything else. The third step is to go beyond your limiting beliefs. And the fourth is to use more of your brain and mind to be able to solve more problems and become more successful and live the kind of life that you choose or desire to live. Let's start with the first step, managing stress effectively. We all know that we experience stress day in and day out. And stress is not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing when you can't manage it effectively. There's such a thing as good stress, also known as eustress, and bad stress, also known as distress. The good stress motivates you, mobilizes you, energizes you, whereas the bad stress paralyzes you, stifles your functioning, your thinking. And we want to focus more on how do we manage the so-called bad stress. Every time you experience stress, you have a certain reaction to stress. And that reaction to stress is pretty much based on how you believe, think, behave, your attitudes, your values. All those different factors influence your reaction to stress. The main thing that we want to accomplish here is that we want to convert the reaction into a response. But everybody reacts to stress, and most people react to stress in a somewhat similar way. When you experience stress, you may find that certain things happen to your body and your way of thinking. For example, your muscles tense up, your breathing might be a little bit more upper chest or shallow. Your eyes may narrow, your heart might beat a little faster, you sweat, you tense or clench your jaws, or your muscles in your back, your arms, your legs. And, when people go through that whole change or shift in their body, we tend to say that the body has now triggered the fight or flight response. Now, the fight or flight response is a response to perceived danger. The thing that we need to focus on is what is causing us to trigger the fight or flight response? Because most of the time we experience stress when we misplaced our keys, or when we're late to an appointment, or we're stuck in traffic, or we're getting upset with someone that wants us to do something we don't want to do. And none of those things are things that really risk our life. Remember, the fight or flight response is a response to perceived danger. None of those things are dangerous, yet those things are triggering all these things to shift in our body, like digestion stopping, the muscles tensing, our heart rate to go up, our inner processes to be put on hold, and everything else the fight or flight response demands. And we're doing this for things that don't merit it. Yet we say, well, I can't help it. That's the way I am. That's the way I react. And quite frankly, that's not true. People don't need to react to stress. They can respond to stress. And when you respond with ability, you are responding responsibly. When you learn to do this, you start to manage stress more effectively, where you are in control of it and it is not in control of you. Now, we want to be conscious of what is going on inside us, in our thinking process and in our body as well. Because once we add more consciousness to the mix, then we're able to manage stress more effectively and make it work for us. What happens a lot of the time is that there's some underlying currents or underlying reasons why we react to stress the way we do and not respond to it instead. We find that most stress is triggered by emotional factors. And those are abandonment, rejection, the feeling you get when you're not in control of the whole situation, for example, helplessness and hopelessness. These are some of the very core emotions that trigger stress. Now, in triggering these core emotions, we're saying to ourselves that I'm triggering something that is rooted in my past. So a lot of the reasons why I react to stress the way I do has to do with things that happened to me in the past. And they're rooted with abandonment, rejection, lack of control, helplessness, and hopelessness. Now, these are emotions. I need to remind you about that. And I remind you about that because when we're talking about the flight or fight response, fighting and fleeing are behaviors, are ways to protect ourselves to survive as a physical being, as a race, as humanity. Well, the fact is we have survived. We don't have to run or flee to protect ourselves or to protect our lives or not to be killed, in order to survive. We've done that already. The thing that we now need to see is that stress reaction or that fight or flight response has evolved through time. And what used to be the fighting part is now anger, an emotion. And what used to be the fleeting part is now fear. So fear and anger have now replaced fighting and fleeing. Makes a lot more sense because fear and anger are emotions. And of course, so are abandonment and rejection and the loss of control or the feeling that you've lost control, helplessness and hopelessness. Those trigger the emotions of anger and fear. So whenever we feel stress, we need to ask ourselves, what really is causing the stress? What's triggering the stress? Is it that all of a sudden I'm triggering a sense of abandonment, like you're leaving me, you're going away, I'm being left alone? Or is it rejection? You don't want me, you don't like me, you're not accepting me for who and how I am? Or is it that we're such control freaks and we want everything to go our way, or we're going to get really upset and start stomping and pouting like, I want it this way, not the other way, do it my way? Or is it that it's hopelessness? There's no hope. I can't do anything about it. It'll never happen. It's impossible. There's no solution. Or helplessness. I can't do anything. I'm not resourceful. I don't have the skill, the knowledge, or the resources to make it happen. I'm helpless here. I'm weak. So one of those things then triggers the fear and or anger that leads to stress. But you need to remember that when it is triggered, it's something of your past. So who's actually in control of a situation when you feel or experience stress setting in or coming in? Who's in control? Is it the adult you who's talking, or is it the child you? Because anything that's triggered has to do with your past. But how far back into your past? When was the first time you felt abandonment? Was it a time when maybe your parents are going out to a nice romantic dinner and you were saying, I want to go too, and they didn't take you and you felt like they abandoned you? Who knows? When was the first time you felt rejection? That could have been a childhood experience as well. And who knows how far back into your childhood you began to feel rejection, and then it was reinforced throughout the years up till now. When was the first time you felt that you were weak and things were out of your control or helpless or hopeless? Again, all of these things are things of your past and they're being triggered, and that leads to anger and or fear and stress. So whenever you feel stress setting in, and you're probably going to feel it somewhere in your body, whether it's going to be in your jaws, your neck, shoulders, in the pit of your stomach, wherever you experience stress, the moment you feel stress, you need to stop and ask yourself, what's at the root of this? What's causing it? Is it my need to control the situation and I can't control everything and everyone all the time? So now you need to separate yourself from that child you or that past you that doesn't have the kind of resources the adult you has. And now, as an adult, say, how can I best handle the situation? And then go ahead and do so. I want to go back and remind you that the fight or flight response has evolved through time. And now to replace it is anger and fear emotions. So whenever we're talking about stress and how stress affects our overall living experience, our way of making decisions and right choices, our way of thinking through problems, our way of being creative, our way to communicate effectively with people we love and work with, and also how stress affects our immune system and can really hurt our immune system, and that can easily lead to illness. In other words, stress can very much affect in a negative way everything we do and our health as well. We have often heard that 80% of all illness is stress related. So an easy way to work with that to start with is that every time you do experience stress, for you to become aware of where you experience it in your body, and at that moment, interrupt the pattern of reaction. And by doing that, you're able to then consciously respond to stress with ability instead. So the moment you feel the stress setting in, you stop, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and say relax and get in control. And then notice where the stress is experienced in your body, and then bring to mind what core emotion is being triggered. Is it abandonment or rejection, or the fact that I'm not in control of the situation or of that person, or I feel helpless or hopeless? Once you identify that, you recognize the fact it is a triggered emotion and belongs to something about your past. It could be that child you that lacks the resources to handle the situation appropriately or responsibly now here as an adult. And so you want to separate yourself from that child you, and you may want to go back to that child you during a meditation later on, and we'll talk more about that, and deal with that child you, and give that child you the resources that he or she needs in order to understand what's happening to you today. So now you come back as you are as an adult, and now you think of better ways of handling what's causing the stress. A child you might say, I don't like that, and stomp the feet, whereas the adult you might say, you know what, I really don't care for that, but let me see what I can do to make it better. And then you take the appropriate actions. So now you're left here as the adult, managing the stress and the situation more effectively and more appropriately.